Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Indira, and today I'm joined with the British 3,000 metre steeple champion, Poppy Tank. But she's a lot more than that. In this episode, Poppy shares her journey from staying controlled through her teenage years, embracing puberty, and then heading out for some golden years in the States. Poppy shares how the NCAA system can be absolutely game-changing and maybe career-changing too, if and when done right. She shares why it went so well for her, and also what happened afterwards. Poppy shares a lot of reflections and insights around how she's been able to continue having sustained longevity and success in the sport. She also shares how she dealt with some difficult times and what enabled her to bounce back. Poppy has a great mindset, and there's a lot that can be learned and taken away from this episode. Okay, as always, if you've been enjoying the show, please be sure to give the podcast a rating, as it helps give credibility to the podcast so I can keep bringing you guys the guests you want to hear from. Also know the episodes are now video format on Spotify and also available on YouTube in video format too. Okay, let's get into the episode. Hi, Poppy, how are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm great, thank you. Hope you're doing well, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, great to have you on, and congrats, yesterday, great performance in Bucks A race.
Yeah, thank you. It was my debut Bucks event, so it was nice to go out there and represent BUAC, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, good fun.
Yeah, and do you have any sort of reflections on the experience? Do you want to talk us through how it was?
Yeah, definitely. I think the course was quite flat. I would say most cross races I do are a little, like quite a lot more undulating than that. These are sort of on more like football slash rugby pitches. So, by nature they are flat. So yeah, it was a very fast course. It was good because it was 8K, a little bit over 8K actually, and that's sort of my preferred distance for cross. I always do better when it's longer. But usually I don't do cross into the new year. I sort of just end at Eurocross each year. And so my focus is much more on the roads at the moment, and so I haven't been running on the grass much. So it was a little bit of a shock at first. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I feel like overall it went well, and we didn't taper for that race. We just kept training through because I've got big goals in the spring. So definitely went in on like tired legs, but that being said, I was still very happy with the effort I put out. And as I say, yeah, it was really fun to represent the uni, and competing alongside Jess and some of the other younger girls was really fun too.
Yeah, definitely a second place, performance to be proud of for sure. And yeah, that's really interesting. You talk about some things to come in spring, so we should definitely get onto that a bit later on.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, of course, you've put down some amazing times on the road over the past year. 2024, you hit the 32:30 in the 10K, 15:44 in the 5K. There's some pretty quick stuff there. So yeah, it makes sense why you'd turn your attentions over there. And before we kind of dive straight into things, can you briefly introduce yourself as an athlete?
yeah. I guess it's kind of difficult because I did do steeplechase for a couple of years that I started in 2023. So for a brief moment, I was identifying as a steeplechaser. However, I made the decision last summer to go back to my roots in the 10K because that was what I felt was my more natural ability was laying there. So I guess I would call myself a long distance runner that's still trying to make it on the track. And yeah, I guess it's difficult to try and describe yourself as an athlete because I don't know, I guess it's an all encompassing thing really. But yeah, I think I'm a strength runner at heart, and I love long distances.
No, I love that. And I think, there's some stuff to pick up on there as well in terms of, wanting to perform on the track and there being that increasing kind of hype and emphasis on track and performing on the track. And also the decision behind making that change because you were the senior British steeplechase champion over the 3,000 in
Yeah.
steeplechase 2023. So, you have got a lot of pedigree, a lot of success in that area, even if it was only a short period of time. And a few
Yeah.
kind of questions to kick things off with. What's the single best piece of advice you've received and why?
That's really hard. I mean, to be honest with you, like most of the best advice I've ever had has been from my mum, and she has not got an athletics background, but she's just got such a wealth of life experience, and she's a very, very intelligent woman. And so I think that she's been very encouraging and supportive of my running dreams and my career so far. And I think that she's always instilled in me such a strong sense of self-belief and determination. She's really brought out a very like deeply competitive side to me. And I think that desire to try and win has really helped keep me through tough times and keep me driving as I get older. So yeah, I don't know if I can come up with one single piece of advice that she's given me, but I think that along the way she's just always pushed me to back myself. And yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, backing yourself and believing in yourself and having that drive is so, so important. And for sure, I think a lot of people who have a lot of success in sport do have that person who kind of champions them, whether that's in your case, your mum, a family member, or someone else
Yeah,
around who's supportive.
definitely. Yeah. No,
And
it's very important to have someone like that because I think that you can do it alone for sure, but it will become very lonely if you are just out there doing it by yourself all the time. So to have somebody who is there for you no matter what through the good times and the bad times, because it's easy to find company when things are going well, but it's a lot harder to find that company and someone to be with you in those dark moments. So I'm very grateful to have my mum by my side always.
no, that's great to hear. And mums always come through. They always kind of
Yeah,
have that little bit of extra stuff. And for you, have
definitely.
there been many dark times along the way then?
Yeah, I think that I have been fairly fortunate that overall my health as a woman has been really good and I've had minimal injury. I've definitely had injury and some of my injuries have been quite bad. I tore my plantar fascia back in 2019 and that was really tough because that was the first time I'd ever had to sit out for an extended period of time. So I found that very challenging because you become very deep rooted in your identity as an athlete. So when that thing is taken away from you, it can be quite isolating and you sort of question your purpose a little bit. And I had that as well when I got injured as a professional athlete. That was my job and my hobby. So that was even harder because I actually felt a little bit useless at that point in time because I couldn't do the thing I was paid to do and I couldn't do what I loved. So yeah, there have been dark times along the way, but overall, I still maintain that I've been fairly lucky. And I suppose I can't just call it luck. It has been very intentional practice of taking care of my body and allowing myself to, go through all those important bodily developments along the way from early puberty up to like full womanhood. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot that has gone into that to kind of have allowed me to be where I'm at now. But yeah, it's not been plain sailing by any means at all.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, a lot of people look into the world of elite sport or sport and they see kind of that very tip of the iceberg, but actually what goes underneath is always quite deep and can be quite dark at times. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's interesting how you've got the comparison there between being injured as a pro and being injured kind of just as an athlete in your own right. But, 2019, you were out in the States doing the kind of whole America thing. So I think it'd be interesting to talk about how that impacted your mindset as well. And of course, identity
Definitely.
is such a huge thing for so many athletes. And before we kind of crack on with things, then a final kind of starter question for you: what are three non-negotiables?
Sleep, good food, and quiet space on my own, for sure.
Love that. That was pretty quick, pretty decisive. So yeah, some important ones there. And yeah, it's great you have that
Yeah.
kind of awareness and knowledge for sure. So let's start at the start. For you, how did you get into running?
Yeah, I've gone through this a few times because had the question asked and I actually couldn't remember, to be honest with you. So I went back and checked with my mum, and she maintains that I'd done a school cross country during like PE or something like that. And I think upon like school pickup time, people's parents went up to my mum and were like, "Oh, your daughter's so fast! Like she's amazing!" And my mum had no idea what they were talking about because apparently she didn't even know I had a cross country that day. So yeah, I'm not sure quite like how it went from there, but I think she decided to go and like have a look around and see if there are any sort of like local running athletic clubs type thing like that. So I went along to a fairly generic athletics club at first, and it was, all the throwing, jumping type of things. And I was very adamant I just wanted to run. So we identified sort of a subcategory of the club, being the distance running. And I went along, and I think at the first session, I actually hated it. And I said, I'm never going back again. But somewhere along the lines, I changed my mind and then, yeah, became obsessed with it essentially. So that's more or less how I got into running.
Lovely. Yeah, I feel like it really highlights how important it is giving, young teenagers or young girls, young people those opportunities through school because so many people do come into it through that kind of way. And for you then, what kept you going or what kept you in the sport kind of through those teen years?
Yeah, I think, I just loved doing sport. I was very into all the other sports as well as running. I did netball, field hockey, and horse riding. And then during PE, we'd do like the other extra sports too, like badminton and like rounders and stuff like that. So I think that having a balanced approach to sport, and as well as the fact that my coach growing up, Simon Anderson from City of Plymouth Athletic Club, he kept us doing a very, I don't know how to describe it really. It was just very chilled and relaxed. And for example, on a Saturday, we'd go up to the woods and we would just run from like, a line on the ground to a random tree. It was all very, very like low key and unstructured. And I think it kept it very fun and playful. And in the summer, we would often go out on the football pitch before training and play with a ball and like just mess around a bit. And I think keeping it quite unserious and casual was really key for my enjoyment because I think when you're young, especially, under the age of 18, if it's not enjoyable and playful, then it doesn't really make sense why you're doing it because you're a child still. So it should be fun. And I think that that gets lost along the way, especially as there's increasing pressure for young athletes to do well. And, with the advancements in technology of shoes and recovery and supplements and all of that stuff, it's becoming more and more professional at a younger age. And I just think that like ultimately it is just a bit of fun. It's not that serious when you're under the age of 20. And, even in your early 20s, like I just don't think it should be an overbearing chore. It should just be fun at the core of it. So yeah, I really do thank Simon for that because he had a massive hand in creating such longevity for my running career. So I'll always be very grateful to him for that, honestly. Yeah, even at the time though, I think I got hints of being like, well, maybe if I did more, if I took it more seriously, I could be better. But at the end of the day, I think largely why I'm doing well now is because I didn't overdo it when I was little. So yeah, I can only thank him for that, really.
Yeah, definitely. It's great that you had someone like that in your life. And I think, again, a lot of people who are successful have that person who holds them back, have that approach where they keep it fun and enjoyable at a young age. And, you raised such a great point there. It is becoming more and more professional and more
Yeah.
pressurized at such a young age. What do you think about kind of say, if someone's doing a lot of training, they're enjoying it, they're getting fulfillment from it at a young age. So they're still getting that enjoyment element. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on the impact of taking it so seriously at a young age, then moving into the senior years?
Yeah, I think that a big one really that comes to mind would be the mental burnout. I think that, in that moment you might be enjoying it, but usually once you start doing more to get better, you have to build on the stuff that you're doing. You can't do loads of training and then take it all away and expect to be just as good. I think that there is somewhat of a, general sort of accumulation of what your body needs to be good. Um, I don't know. It's really difficult to say because if you're enjoying it, that really is all that matters. However, I think particularly as a female athlete, there's so much to consider. You've got puberty that you really need to go through, and I think if you're getting to close to 20, you're not having a period. There's probably some serious questions to be asked about your general health as well as your athlete health. And I think it cannot be understated the importance of women going through puberty and having full development because there's so much more to life as well outside of running. And I say that as someone who is absolutely in love with the sport. It's just that if you're not happy in your everyday life and you're not well in yourself, then the athletics is never going to happen for you and you're not going to enjoy it. So I think it is a very difficult balance to strike when you're young and you've got so much enjoyment and enthusiasm for the sport. I think it kind of comes down to your coaches and your parents and sort of those more authoritative figures when you are still a child to be mindful of the future and kind of exercise that authority a little bit. And there might be a need for them to hold you back a bit. And it is really hard because, yeah, when you've got a kid who's really keen to do well, it's like you don't want to taint that enjoyment, but it's just, I don't know, young athletes are so precious. You just want to be really careful with them. And at the end of the day, people are going to look back in your career and you don't want to be that person that peaked at 18. You want to be someone that can keep going on longer and longer in the sport. So it's tough. Yeah, I don't know if I have the perfect answer for that, but I think that it will come down to parents and coaches a little bit more, and they need to be very aware of the influence they're having on those young athletes.
For sure. I mean, I'd say that was a pretty damn good answer. And,
Yeah, thank
you
you.
bring up some really key, really vital things. You've got puberty that you've got to go through. You've got your health, your athlete health. They are two separate things. And ultimately, it
Hmm.
is health that must be prioritized. And, you
Yeah,
talk around there, bringing up sort of coaches and parents. And, it is true. It's kind of underage minors here. It does involve, or it does need someone with maybe that bit more life experience to guide them. That can sometimes be challenging because maybe parents aren't educated, maybe coaches aren't
yeah.
educated. Have you got any thoughts or reflections around ways in which maybe that can be rolled out on a wider scale?
Yeah, it's really hard. I suppose you can do your own reading up online about particularly female development and puberty and stuff like that. But yeah, I suppose that there needs to be more attention and awareness brought to it. I think that people are starting to have the conversation, and you do see occasional articles or like podcast episodes about what to do with young athletes, and particularly those that have a lot of, potential and are showing real promise in the sport. But I don't know. I think it's so hard to know how best to like bring that education and awareness. I think that the good bit is just to like bring attention to it at first and be like, well, this is clearly a little bit of a trending issue that we have. We have a lot of young athletes that do very well, and then they sort of hit an injury cycle, and a lot of people don't ever break out of it. And we start to ask questions of like, well, why is that happening, and what are the patterns, and what are we noticing years down the line? And then you start to come up with solutions surrounding that, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm not a parent or a coach, so it would be hard for me to say. But I do think that parents getting involved with the athletics club and trying to become more educated about the sport is good. You don't want it all to be very overbearing, because there is still an element to like allowing young athletes to explore the sport themselves and find an independence. But I think that having a network of knowledge is really, really crucial. So I would say some level of education is always quite important. Yeah.
A network of knowledge. And yeah, education is absolutely the key to power in so many ways. And I think that highlights potentially the need for perhaps there to be maybe an increased emphasis or action taken around providing education to parents at say local athletics clubs. And let's turn this back to your story. You navigated those teenage years successfully. You, by the sounds of it, let puberty come along, embraced it, did it, let it do its thing, and you did emerge very successfully on the other side of that. And so, to bring sort of anyone listening up to speed, through your teenage years, you were, a good runner, some particularly good performances here and there. Kind of under 17 years, you kind of dipped off a little bit compared to where you were maybe just before.
Mm-hmm.
Then post your under 17 years, you came back to sort of have a season of your life, really placing top 10 at the nationals, and then things kind of went up from there. So you talk about your mum not being someone who was sort of within the sport already. You did have a good coach. How did you successfully navigate those years, and what was your experience of it like?
Yeah, I guess I can't remember like all the specifics that well because it was a little bit ago now. But that being said, I do remember, as you say, just allowing my body to go through puberty. And yeah, the beginning of under 17, sorry, was challenging, because I think that at that point in time, like my body was changing a lot in terms of shape, and like I was growing, I was kind of entering my woman's body. And I think that there was a lot of days I remember going to training and actually just really struggling. I felt very lethargic and heavy, and at times I felt like my body wasn't mine, and it was sort of like you'd be running and you felt energized, but your legs just wouldn't like move the same. And so I think that like I actually partly remember wanting to step away from running for a bit, and I was really leaning into my field hockey. And I think that like having another sport to turn my attention to, and even like having that as like an emotional and energy outlet, was really great for me, because you mentioned like there is that sort of dropout issue with people kind of going through puberty, and maybe it's not going well and they're not finding the enjoyment, so they just quit. And I think that like I was very fortunate at the time that I still had another sport in hockey and I was horse riding as well. So I was still able to like exercise that need for a passion. And I think that along the way, I just started to really miss the running. And I was like, well, maybe it won't be that great for a little bit, but I still really want to do this. And I think that a lot of it was kind of riding out that wave of puberty and becoming a little bit more accepting of where my body was at. And yeah, I think I just let it sort of organically bring me back to it in a way. But it wasn't without struggle. And I think that, yeah, I'm very grateful that I had gone through puberty and that that wasn't a challenge that I was really like up against. It was just sort of navigating my new body that I was growing into. And rather than fighting it, just learning to work with it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you're saying about it feeling not quite like your body, your legs feeling sort of lethargic and heavy. I know personally, I remember going through that and, everything seems right, but you just don't feel right. And it goes on for
Yeah,
it is about 2 years pretty much. And it is normally
yeah.
around kind of under 17 time. For you, you talk about having balance, having the other sports, which is so, so important for sure.
Mhm.
Were there any times where you felt tempted to maybe try training harder, training more? Or you found mentally it was challenging because of being able to compare yourself to where you were in the past?
Yeah, yeah, I think there was a lot of challenge. I'll be honest with you, it wasn't even so much about myself. I think I was looking at a lot of the other girls who were running well, and I felt at times I'd look at them, the girls who were at the top, they were a lot skinnier than me, running a lot faster than me. And I'll be honest with you, I found it really disheartening, and I think that that's why I did sort of drift away from it and think maybe hockey's for me because I was like, I'm a really strong girl. I'm not built like that. I don't really know how I would look the way that they look. And yeah, I just felt like it wasn't an imposter syndrome. I think I just had this like, it was demoralizing, really. I'm seeing these girls very, very lean, very petite, and I wasn't looking like that. And I just think that my comparison was very much rooted in what other people were doing. It wasn't even with my former self. So yeah, I think when I look back on it, it was really hard seeing sometimes those magazine features and being like, that's not me. I don't look like that. I don't feel like that. But I never felt tempted to be sucked into it. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like a level of self-preservation that I've always had a very healthy relationship with food. I never felt like I'm going to cut out food. I'm going to decrease the amount I eat. And I feel fortunate that that's where my mental health is. And like, I'm very grateful that my mind didn't take me down that path, as I see that sadly a lot of young athletes do go that way. But it is difficult to remember exactly what I was thinking and feeling at that time because it was a little bit ago. But I do think that I've always been quite a strong character and I just sort of stayed true to who I was and I found a way to come back to it like on my own terms without falling into a dangerous cycle, I think. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say really.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's great you talk about kind of that particular, maybe very lean, very small, very petite role models and the impact on that being demoralizing. Because I think,
Yeah.
well, that is one of the leading causes for kind of starting or triggering perhaps eating disorders within the sport. And so
Yeah.
many girls have that experience and it is really challenging. I know I remember feeling the same at kind of a similar age as well. And I think it just speaks to the importance of showing a wide range of women in the sport because sometimes although the physical representation isn't necessarily a true reflection of the reality, it is something that people can easily look at and very quickly turn away from. And potentially if people are leaving the sport because they don't feel they look like part of the sport, then no one's ever going to see anything different, even if different is
Yeah.
better or the same, which as we
Yeah.
know now, body shape type doesn't really matter. It's about being healthy. But I think what you show here as well is that you've got a very good approach from a mindset perspective in terms of focusing on your own journey, but also being flexible and adaptable to a situation and potentially focusing more on what you can control as opposed to kind of seeing an end goal and being like, oh, this is the way, this is not the way. Would you say that's a fair reflection of kind of how you approach sport?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like, I will be honest with you, I do have a lot of really big goals, and those are what get me out of bed and like out the door to run each day. But I think that for me, a lot of it is rooted in the fact that I actually just love running. It makes me feel great. I have like my best friends when, yeah, I guess like some of the greatest friends I made was when I went to Utah for my undergrad, and having that really, really strong team environment. I felt like that was the first time I'd had that real like sense of community in the sport. And I think that that really made it kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain it really, because I was like, this is where I just feel so at home. I have met so many amazing people in the sport, and I feel like it's given me so many opportunities that just keeps that level of love high, even when things are quite difficult. Because yeah, it's like if you ultimately just enjoy it, then you're more likely to stay in it rather than doing it just because you think you could make money, or if you just want to be like achieving all these accolades. Like it's great to have goals, of course, but I think you have to have like a genuine love for the sport at the core of it. Yeah.
For sure. I think it's great you mentioned that. And I think I heard recently on another podcast, actually might have been High Performance, that having goals and being motivated by maybe more external factors can lead you to be very successful. But what sets apart people who are successful versus exceptional is people who truly believe in what they're doing. And by the sounds of it, for you, that very much is the case. And you talk about kind of being out in Utah, and of course for you, you went off to America, and that clearly was a great choice for you. Let's fill in kind of the gap between coming out of those under 17 years. You started to see success in the UK. Can you talk
Mhm.
us through how things kind of went off in that direction, and then ultimately how you ended up heading out to the States?
Yeah, so I think it was around like lower sixth where you start to have those conversations at school of setting up your UCAS profile and looking at universities in the UK. And I knew running was what I wanted to continue doing. I actually had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I felt quite panicked and stressed because I had friends at school who were doing these sort of extracurricular things for their potential future career. And I honestly just had no idea what excited me. I was like, I love running and I'm doing really well at school, but there's not one thing I love. And we had one of those really generic career fairs where you kind of come to school as something for the day. And I came as a lawyer, and I was like, my mum basically told me I could be a good lawyer because I'm really argumentative. So I just leaned into that, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll be a lawyer. And you don't really have any sort of context to how hard a lot of these career paths are. And so yeah, I got into that sort of age of like 17-ish. And I think the idea of going to America came up to me because sort of like scholarship agency came to our school and gave a talk, and they really sold the idea to me. I went home that day and I was buzzing. I was like, I'm gonna go to America and I'm gonna run. And I think my mom was a bit like, okay, like what do you mean? And so we got like looking into it and all of that. And so I think I just became hyper fixated on going to America at that point, because the first year of uni in America is a liberal arts year. So it's like you're not committing to any one program, you apply to the university. And so then by your second year, you declare your major. And so you have a more specific academic focus. However, obviously in the UK, you apply to a course at a specific uni, and they're looking for specific grades in specific subjects. So I think I really shied away from sort of pigeonholing myself at that point, because I was like, I have no idea who I am or what I want to be. I just know I want to run, and going to America sounds like a pretty cool idea. So yeah, I was pretty sold on it, honestly. And then I went into my last year of school pretty focused on that. And maybe my A levels suffered a little bit because I was like, well, I'm going to go to America. I need to do well in the SAT. And that was kind of it. But yeah, I think I became very set on the idea very quickly. And so I think as a strong person, I sort of made my mind up about it, and I was like, I'm going to do it. And thankfully, my parents were on board and very supportive of it. And yeah, in the summer of 2016, I sort of packed up my two suitcases, and my mum flew out with me to Salt Lake City in Utah. And yeah, I guess I'd also taken a visit the year prior, actually. And that really sold it to me, to go out there and meet the coaches and meet the team and sort of be able to picture myself there. I could really see myself living in Salt Lake for 5 years. And so after that visit, that was it. I was in love with going to America. And yeah. I was just like, that's what I'm doing. And I never really looked back, I guess. Like, yeah, the first semester was really hard. I was super homesick, but my mom was like, you got to just ride it out. And yeah, ended up being the best experience of my life still to this day. So I'm very happy I went there.
That's so great to hear. You know, you sometimes hear of things going a little bit not so great out in the States, but it's great to hear that you had such a good experience. And I think that's so true. Often the things that are best for us or turn out to be the best things are sometimes things that start off a bit challenging or a bit daunting or a bit difficult. But sometimes it is
Yeah,
about trusting that underlying gut instinct, which it sounds like you very much were right, this is where I need to go. This is what I
yeah.
want to do. And you lent into that.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest with you, I think a big part of that was that I took a visit. I know people who have struggled in America have had various reasons for that, but I did notice that sometimes a trend was that people didn't go on a visit to where they applied and ended up going to school. So I think that, things can look really great on paper, but then when you actually go there, you can feel the atmosphere for yourself and like get a sense of the team environment and the coaching dynamic. It can be really different in reality. So I would say to anyone looking at going to an American school, go on a visit. And I know that you may not be offered an official visit free of charge by the uni, but if you can find a way to get yourself out there to go and visit the place that you think you might want to go to, do it because it can be very different than what it is on paper. And so you have to be able to visualize your whole life there, not just the running, not just the uni and the school. Like you need to be able to see yourself in that city or town and what life would be like outside of running because injury is an inevitable part of our sport. And so you need to be able to live there and actually enjoy the place itself. So 100% my advice is take a visit and be able to see yourself living there. And I think that you're boosting your chances of success by 100% by taking a visit. So that's just my piece of advice.
No, I love that. And I think that's so true. Don't judge a book by its covers. And when it comes to big decisions, especially big life decisions, it is important to make sure that the atmosphere is right. And you can only ever really get that 3D representation when you go in
Yeah,
3D. And,
definitely.
it can maybe, like you say, it could be more pricey, but there's more than just monetary costs. There are opportunity costs, there are other costs. And
Yeah.
yeah, like you say, being injured, it's going to come along, or things like that can happen. And for you, you talked or you spoke earlier about how it was maybe your first sense of community and clearly
Hmm.
something that maybe contributed a lot to your love of the sport and maybe even kept you in it to some extent. Can you talk us through then what the setup was and what that kind of meant for you and how it impacted you as a person and an athlete?
Yeah, definitely. So coming from the club system in the UK, and as I said, my club with my coach was very unstructured and casual, and I absolutely loved that. But going to America, it was taken to a new level because it was very professional, it was very structured. We had a team of, I was at an all women's team, so we had 22 roughly on the distance side and about 50 odd of us when you bring in the sprints, jumps, and throws as well. So yeah, you go out to training each day with your 20 plus teammates and you go and meet your coach outside the locker room. And then we'd often go out for a team run, or we'd meet by the track and then we'd do our track sessions together. And you had the support staff there. So, like our head coach, Kyle Kepler, was always there with our assistant coach at the time, Mac. And then you'd have the athletic trainers out there. And sometimes you get the strength coach come out and watch the sessions. So, it's very professional, it's very structured, and I personally loved that because I feel like it really, really gave me that professional setting of sport, and I think that I really enjoyed the seriousness of it. I felt really elite and I really liked that. I think at times it was a bit overbearing because having that many women on a team, there has to be kind of an authority around what we're doing. You can't just like have a free for all. I think that there needed to be a sense of order. And I enjoyed it, honestly. I think that I really thrived in the environment, having that routine. And as I say, having all those girls to train with every day, like I became so close with a lot of them. It felt like my sisters. And I do have two sisters at home, Phoebe and Verity, but having a home away from home was really important for me because, when you're going through tough times, whether that be in your personal relationships or school or in training, I had those girls to lean on. And I felt like we were always there for each other no matter what. And I think as well, it was a very unique situation because no one else understands your experience quite like those girls on your team. So yeah, it was just amazing, really. Everything was kind of paid for us. You know, we would get flown off to races in California and Washington and Oregon, and then we'd go more Midwest for the cross country seasons, sort of like Indiana and Ohio and Illinois, places like that. So I got to see so many different parts of the US, and it is true that each state feels almost like a mini country. And I really enjoyed that aspect. I felt like I was getting a whole new worldview. Being from Plymouth and Devon, it's a relatively small seaside city. So, yeah, it was really special going about the US with my best friends and my coach. I got on really well with Kep, and I felt like he always had a lot of belief in me. And he was also very, very aware of the importance of longevity and cultivating a love for our sport. And I think that he would often talk about us being able to continue running for fun if we wanted to after college. So, and I think he did well at that because a lot of my friends do still run. Some of them did have to take time off, and not everybody had it as easy. But I would say largely a lot of my friends from my team at Utah still run. They do a lot of trail running. A lot of them still live in Utah. And yeah, I think that like it would go amiss if we didn't credit Kep for that because I think he really made it a family environment. And I think that I owe so much to him, honestly, for my success and love for the sport that kept me in it to this day, really. So yeah, it was great. I mean, as I say, it was not always perfect, but I was very fortunate to have a very positive experience in the NCAA.
I mean, nothing in life's ever perfect, but that does
Yeah,
sound like you really made the most of the experience. And he sounds like a great guy. And it is so true. You know, anything can happen in life, and life's always going to do life. We really don't have as much control or autonomy as we think, but with
yeah,
good people around, it's always possible to get through these times. And in some ways, it can even be a way to deepen and strengthen and create more meaningful relationships. So, yeah,
definitely.
that's really great to hear that perspective, and also how you're able to kind of benefit from, you know, say the global perspective, seeing these other places. And I'm sure that that would have had a positive impact on you, you know, personally in so many ways as well. And so I kind of want to follow up on a few things. You know, you had a great experience, by the sounds of it, kind of textbook perfect in so many ways. Firstly, do you think you'd be where you are now if you hadn't had the experience you had out in the States?
Yeah, definitely not. I think that going out to America for uni really opened up a lot of doors. And I think that the depth and level of competition that I got to experience out there was something I was never going to experience back here. It's just a matter of fact that they have, you know, a way larger resource of funding for the sport. And just, you know, the size of the country with that many people, it's going to lend itself to depth. And so I think that if I had not gone to America for uni, I would never have been able to have the success that I have had and be able to have an understanding of the sport that I've been able to gain so far. So yeah, I really do owe so much to my NCAA experience because it taught me so much, really opened my eyes and so many doors of opportunity. So definitely, yeah.
And when you say opened your eyes, you know, opened many doors, are there any doors in particular or kind of realizations that you'd be able to talk a bit more about?
Yeah, I think that like in terms of it opening my eyes, I think I realized just how talented a lot of athletes are. And I got to go to some of these races that were just unreal in how competitive they were. It felt like every day I was going to a race that was like just it almost was giving like the Olympics sensation because it was just the talent that some of these women had and the times they were running was just so inspiring. Like for example, I always really looked up to Jess Hull from Australia. She ran at the University of Oregon, and I just was so awestruck by her. I felt like she was such a strong runner, and she'd had such a really great progression at the University of Oregon. And I honestly really idolized her because she was very friendly, and I just felt like she was one of those rock star athletes that you couldn't help but sort of gravitate towards. And I found her really inspiring. And obviously, you know, she's now got her silver medal at the Olympics. So I guess like I idolized the right person, honestly, because yeah, she just is like improved so much over the years. And I think that there was so many other athletes like her who had just really impressive track records in the NCAA. So yeah, I think I got to see so much and experience being in those really like competitive races that really got me used to being there and bringing my A game. And yeah, I think that, when you're in those environments of success, that kind of lends itself to you developing your own success. So I think it encouraged me to, really engage with the sport and not just train harder, but train smarter as well, like really dialing in on my nutrition. And we were very fortunate to have nutritionists at Utah that would support that development. And we had really great strength coaches, and they were really great about driving home the importance of being strong. And so, yeah, I think that I was just able to like really dial in on all the little things that would make me a good runner. So I'm very grateful for that, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you did idolize the right person there, and I imagine
Yeah,
that maybe there were more things at play, perhaps, certain subtleties that you were picking up on there in terms of, maybe mindset and approach that actually were louder than maybe just the raw talent on its own. And I
definitely.
think by the
Yeah,
sounds of it, you described the importance and role of kind of the other areas, not necessarily just the training. If you had to
yeah.
pinpoint three things in particular, what do you think were the three things of greatest benefit that you got out
From
from your time in the States that you
yeah.
think you probably wouldn't, even if you'd been in the UK with a good training setup?
Uh, I think the importance of like group training, honestly, like I would say that the UK is quite known for a lot of individualized solo training, and like it does work, but it can get very lonely. And so I think being in the NCAA, you really get used to that team aspect of like sharing the session. And a good example of what we used to do was be in like trains where you'd rotate who's leading the rep and sort of tucking in and learning to like share the load with another girl. And sometimes you have to like swallow your pride of it and be like, you don't have to send it at the front of every session. You learn to kind of gauge your effort a little bit and learn to help each other out when it's hard. Another one, obviously, being nutrition. As I said, we had nutritionists at Utah that were really great at bringing home ideas of what's good to eat, what's not good to eat, and even just being like, food is really crucial when you're done with training. I mean, we would come back from sessions and we were really lucky to have a nutrition bar that we could go straight to. And it would be stacked with like loads of great food that you can make sandwiches. It'd be like protein shakes and protein bars and just a lot of different types of foods that were available to us for free. So we go straight there after practice, we'd get fueled up, and then we'd probably go on to our next lecture or weights or something like that. So I think, yeah, we were really lucky to have that. And the third, honestly, I guess I would maybe say strength training. Like it's not always a very valued thing in distance running. I think the biggest bit about strength training is that it is a massive injury prevention tool. And it's not like we're out there trying to bulk and be massive. We're just trying to support the training that we're doing out there on the track or on the road or the grass or whatever surface we're on. And I do think that I learned so much about strength training from the coaches at Utah. And I think that that was really important to me.
Yeah, definitely. And was there any one takeaway, perhaps maybe from the nutrition and strength that, in a sentence or so you could briefly share?
You need to eat a lot more than you think you do, to be honest. I feel like people are like, oh yeah, I had a little snack or whatever. It's like, no, no, you really need to eat a full meal after training. So yeah,
Yeah.
always eat more than you think you need to.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
And then from a strength perspective.
A strength one is just try and learn how to lift properly.
Mm.
I think that sometimes people can go into the gym and maybe get a little bit carried away, and I don't know, it's difficult because not everyone has access to a strength coach, but YouTube is a great tool. You can go on there and like Google how to do a squat or a hang clean or something like that. And I think knowledge is power, and being able to utilize that knowledge properly to, make your body really strong and injury resistant is a very important tool. So I think to become educated on your own strength and conditioning is really key, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. It always pays to build strong foundations, and yeah, the internet is full of good resources these days as well. And so to
Definitely.
continue on from your journey, during your time in the States, you did improve very significantly, ran some great times, was selected for the European Championships twice. You then came back, things have gone uphill continuously. You want to talk us through what it was like transitioning back to the UK and how your journey's kind of evolved since then?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to have a small college. Graduated from Utah. Sadly, it was a pretty negative and toxic experience for me, so I did come back to the UK. And to be honest, I was really lucky in 2023. I was in a really dark place and really unsure if I wanted to continue in the sport. And I'd reached out to Luke Gunn via email, and I basically said, "Look, I don't know if I'm going to continue running or not. Can you help me?" Basically, so Luke was really nice and emailed me back, I think probably within a couple of days. And then we set up a call and I essentially asked him to coach me. And luckily he said yes. So that was kind of the birth of a new running life for me in a sense, really. I moved back to the UK in the spring of 2023 and I came home with all my bags and then I started commuting up to Birmingham from Plymouth like once a week to go and get to know Luke and basically find a place to live in Birmingham. And yeah, I moved to Birmingham kind of on a whim. It seemed a bit random at the time, but it was just really so I could be coached by Luke. And at that point in time, I was keen to learn the steeplechase. So I had never hurdled in my life. And so Luke was like, "Yeah, this is a pretty crazy idea, but sure, we'll go for it." And I think he was really excited because he's a massive steeplechase advocate. I think he would love everyone to do the steeplechase if he had it his way. So yeah, I think it was really great that at that point in time he was willing and able to take me on as an athlete and teach me how to hurdle and steeplechase basically. So yeah, coming back to the UK was different. I had been out in the States for about 7 years at that point. So it was definitely an adjustment, but obviously to come back to your home country, I found it an easier transition because it is what you know, even though I've been gone for a while. The weather was obviously a little bit of a tough contender because I was not used to that much grey sky and rain, but I got used to it. And yeah, I think being back in the UK has actually been really great for me. I'm much closer to my family. I'm really close with my mum and my sisters. So being able to be in a driving distance of them now is really nice. And yeah, it's great. Like it's just easier living back in your home country. There's less things to contend with, to be honest with you. So I'm a lot happier now. I live back in the UK, and I don't know if I'll live here forever, but yeah, I think right now it's where I'm happiest, and I see myself staying in Birmingham for quite a while, to be honest with you.
No, that's great to hear that things are going well at the moment. And yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it's just about focusing on the moment and not looking too far ahead into the future. And I'm sorry to hear that you had a toxic experience, especially after what sounded like some real golden years out in the States. And I think, your mindset and your approach when you did come back to the UK shows a lot of proactivity and taking initiative in, realizing, identifying what gone wrong, looking for a potential solution and pursuing that and
Yeah,
committing to that and knowing what for you was important and what needed to happen and making that work really. But can you talk us
yeah.
through what was so dark about 2023 and maybe kind of what happened with that whole situation?
I mean, I suppose I don't want to go into too much
Yeah,
detail because to some extent I would say I'm a fairly private person and I
of
think that sometimes some things are better left unsaid. But yeah, I would just felt very isolated. That when you're struggling with running and you don't feel that support from the environment that you're in, it's really hard to stay afloat. And I think that my running was going downhill, my mental health was at an all-time low. And it is quite easy to look back on it now and see it for what it was. But at the time, it felt a very confusing experience because I felt like maybe I'm just not cut out for this. You start to internalize things that people say to you and you start to think that you're the problem. But then you can look back in hindsight and be like, no, actually, I can validate what I went through. It was really hard. And I'm really proud of myself that I actually managed to get out of a really bad situation and come home, basically. So,
course.
yeah, yeah,
No, well, thank you for sharing. And yeah, proud of you too. It takes a lot of strength of character to take yourself out of a dark hole. And it certainly does take that kind of initial action from the person in it. And when you're in a bad place and when mental health isn't at its best, that's also when you're kind of unable to see it. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It is very difficult. If you're comfortable
Definitely.
sharing, would you be able to kind of maybe share or briefly give an overview of what kind of gave you the courage to take the initial step to say no? Because I think that's such an important thing to be able to do, especially in the world of athletics. And, that's something that you
Yeah,
successfully did.
definitely. I think I actually outsourced support emotionally from family and friends. I think I started telling them things that were happening and being like, I felt a little bit, am I crazy or is this actually bad? And sometimes seeking that external validation kind of has to happen because I would say I'm an overthinker. I'm very like introspective, and I think that I needed to hear it from someone else to sort of validate the way I was feeling. And I was really lucky to have my mum on my side, and I could call her and really talk things through with her. And talking to other athletes and stuff like that, I think you start to feel certain that actually you are right. This is not a good situation. And yeah, I think eventually I just woke up one day and I was like, I'm done and I'm leaving. And I thankfully had the resources to do that. And I was able to get myself a flight home and pack up my stuff and yeah, see that out. So yeah, it was hard. I don't tend to like think about it too much because it's not that fun to look back on, but it is an important thing to like, yeah, be proud of myself and remind myself that I got through that really tough time and I've managed to pull myself back into a really good headspace and be a lot happier and confident now. So it formed a really important part of my character development, I guess, but it's not something I tend to reflect back on fondly, I suppose. And I try just to like focus on the present and the future and just yeah, keep going really.
Absolutely. And that's such a beautiful mindset. And thank you for sharing that with us and taking us through that time. And for sure, difficult times are, those opportunities for personal growth and self-actualization to some extent. And it definitely is important. I think we live in a world where there is a lot of evidence of the past, comparison of the past, but actually, time's always going forwards, and the only thing you can control is the future. So it definitely is a good approach to take sometimes to just keep powering on forwards. Can you run us
Yeah.
through then? You did the steeplechase situation, change of coach. Can you talk us through your time with that and then what ultimately led you to kind of move back towards the roads and then maybe now
Yeah,
track?
definitely. So I decided to do the steeplechase. As I had mentioned, I wasn't sure I wanted to stay in the sport. So I think the steeplechase provided a really good sort of purpose. It gave me something new to focus on, and learning a new skill was really hard but very exciting at the time. And I really enjoyed learning it. It was quite hard on my body, to be honest with you. I'm not an injury prone person. I would describe myself as quite robust, but I was starting to get little niggles here and there. And I think that yeah, sometimes I wonder if I just came to it that little bit too late. And I mean, there's everything to say I could have been really great at it, but I think that I wasn't enjoying it enough last year. And I ultimately just really missed the 5 and the 10K because that's what I was really great at and was showing the most potential in when I graduated from Utah. So I felt like I had a lot of unfinished business in the 5 particularly and the 10K. So I basically went to Luke and said, look, I'm quite keen to go back to this event, will you support me in that? And he thankfully said yes. So we went back to the drawing board and kind of tried to lean more into what I'm naturally good at, which is those longer reps and the 10K type training. So yeah, that's my focus now. I've got like big goals, for example, trying to make the European Road Champs team in the spring for the 10K. So everything's kind of geared towards that at the moment. But I really do want to try and get my times down on the track. I feel like between the time that I left Utah and now, I've not had a whole lot of opportunity to really flourish on the track and reach my own full potential. And I don't really know where my ceiling's at. And maybe I'll find that in the near future and maybe I won't. But I would really like to try and give it a go on the track and see just how far I can push myself in the 5 and the 10. So yeah, I'll probably be doing the British Champs 10K on the track this year. I think yeah, not sure yet where that will be hosted, but yeah, I'm excited, and I do just have quite a rejuvenated sense of enthusiasm for the sport, and I think that that is a really good sign that I made the right gut decision to go back to the 10K, because I just feel happier in my training and a higher level of self-efficacy. So yeah, I'm feeling good about that, and I'm excited to try and like go for it this year again.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And for sure, it was sort of 2021 when you set those track PBs, and, you haven't even run a 10,000 on track since
Yeah,
2021. And, 2024, you set PBs in the road 10K, 5K road, 32:30, 15:44. I want to pick up on one thing that you kind of speak about there with trying out a new kind of, I guess, discipline within running with the steeplechase. I
yeah,
think what you show is commitment, but also in a way, in a sense, kind of taking a break. Sometimes when things get difficult, it's like, oh, have I come to the end of the book? Do I close it now?
yeah,
But actually, I think you show that you can take that break. You can kind of have a bit of variety, but also you can stick with it. And, you have to go through the hard times to have the good times. So I think that
yeah,
was,
definitely.
a really smart approach there in that sense. And yeah, exciting stuff coming, for you in this upcoming year. And I guess to kind of close out with, as we're coming to the end of our time now, one, are you studying, or what's the setup at kind of Birmingham at the moment for you? And then finally, if you won the lottery tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd do?
Okay, so I am currently a student at UOB. I started a PhD in the School of Metallurgy and Materials in July. And my project is recycling medical devices like hip and knee replacements. And I honestly owe a lot of thanks to my supervisor, Paul Withy. He took me on last summer. I was really struggling for a sense of purpose outside of running. I was no longer sponsored, and I was kind of, yeah, a little bit lost, to be honest with you. And Paul took me under his wing and has brought me into his research group. And I'm really enjoying having another purpose in life outside of the running. And my project is very focused on sustainability and that recycling element. So I'm very passionate about the environmental impact that I could potentially have with that project. So yeah, that's going really well. I'm enjoying that. And
Well, that's so
if I
exciting.
yeah, it is. It's great. And if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would honestly just try and make sure that like my family was well looked after. I would be like, what do we need to everyone feel relaxed and secure, and just sort of take care of things that needed to be taken care of for them. So that's what I would do. I'd look after my family.
Oh, that's so wholesome to hear. And, it sounds like you certainly have got a lot of purpose and a really big heart as well to go along with things.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be wishing you the very best in the upcoming season, and looking forward to seeing you smash some new PBs out on the track. And for sure, I think you deserve good things to come. So yeah,
Oh, thank you.
thank you so
That's really
much for your
kind.
time. Thanks for sharing, and in particular, even around some areas that may be a little less comfortable to talk about. So, thank you. So, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This really helps to get the content out there. And I want to make this podcast the best possible for you. So, go follow Fitter, Faster, Happier on Instagram. That's Fitter, Faster, Happier, to leave your questions, comments, and feedback, and for updates and guest requests. All the best for the week ahead, guys. Run happy, live happy, be happy.